Win for life in 2020.
President Trump tweets support for unborn children, but gives some exceptions. I'm Mark Irons at the White House. How pro-life groups are reacting.
Preparing for questioning. One of President Trump's judicial nominees, who once argued against a Catholic farmer, is set to face the Senate Judiciary Committee. Letter to a Suffering Church. In a new book, Bishop Robert Barron speaks out about the clergy sex abuse crisis and the way forward. Plus, singing with joy. Washington's prominent African-American church celebrates its new archbishop ahead of tomorrow's installation. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, May 20th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump gingerly wades into the Alabama abortion law debate as some top pro-life Republicans say the measure goes too far. The focus now shifts to exceptions to the controversial ban, with the president insisting his position is the same as Ronald Reagan's. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump didn't mention Alabama's abortion ban by name, but is clearly addressing key aspects. The law only allows abortion if the mother's life is at risk, but not in cases of rape or incest. Now the president is sharing his view of that issue. The president writes on Twitter, "As most people know, and for those who would like to know, I am strongly pro-life with the three exceptions: rape, incest, and protecting the life of the mother." His tweet comes days after Alabama banned abortion in the state, even if a child is conceived in rape or incest. A White House official tells us the president's tweet seems to show he doesn't support the Alabama law. Pro-life groups push back.
It's not extreme to defend all innocent life.
Allison Centofonte with the national pro-life group Live Action says the president may be trying to find middle ground on the issue.
But the problem with that is it's logically inconsistent. For you to in one breath say there is life in the womb, and then out of the next breath say, but if it's conceived in rape or incest, it's completely okay to destroy it.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, abortion ban has got to go.
Abortion advocates protested in Alabama over the weekend. Even some Republicans, like Senator Mitt Romney and Congressman Kevin McCarthy, say the state law goes too far. In nearly all cases, it makes performing an abortion a felony. The mother would not be charged. Back on Twitter, the president is also listing his pro-life accomplishments, writing, "We have come very far in the last 2 years with 105 wonderful new federal judges, many more to come, 2 great new Supreme Court justices, the Mexico City policy, and a whole new and positive attitude about the right to life." Centofonte applauds President Trump's pro-life accomplishments and blasts his political challengers.
Right now, every single Democratic presidential candidate is lockstep with the Democratic platform, which is abortion through all 9 months for any reason at the taxpayer dollar.
Today, another pro-life group, Susan B. Anthony List, tells us President Trump continues to go on the offense for life and call out Democrats for supporting late-term abortions and failing to support babies who survive failed abortions. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. President Donald Trump is directing former White House Counsel Don McGahn to defy a congressional subpoena. The White House today cited a legal opinion from the Justice Department, which argues McGahn would have immunity from testifying before Congress about his work as a close Trump advisor. Democrats have been eager to hear from McGahn, who was a key figure in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. The House Judiciary Committee had issued a subpoena to compel the lawyer to testify by tomorrow. A Republican congressman from Michigan says President Trump's conduct is impeachable, but Justin Amash stops short of calling for Congress to begin the impeachment process. And even the president's critics say the timing is not right.
The American people just aren't there. And I think those that are considering impeachment have to look also at the jury, which would be the Senate. The Senate is certainly not there either.
Senator Mitt Romney says he spent 2 days reading the Mueller report. The Utah Republican says the investigation did not uncover enough evidence to make an obstruction of justice case against the president. The Senate gears up to question a judicial nominee who argued against a Catholic farmer. Michael Bogren defended the city of East Lansing, Michigan, as it tried to block the farmer from selling at its market. President Trump nominated Bogren to serve as a federal judge. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason brings us more on this story you'll only see here tonight. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump did promise to nominate conservative judges, but there's new questions about one of those picks, Michael Bogren. Senators will question him and 4 others Wednesday.
My daughter Brianna's organic apple orchard that we planted in 2004.
Farmer Steve Tennis wouldn't open up his orchard for a same-sex wedding, citing his Catholic beliefs. Then East Lansing stopped him from selling his apples at the city's farmers market.
All of a sudden I felt like we couldn't even believe what we wanted to believe. We had to be quiet.
The Michigan Catholic Conference filed this brief in support of the farmer, writing, "The city of East Lansing's regulation of the Catholic faith stems from animosity towards the faith and cannot be allowed to continue." The man who defended the city was Michael Bogren, now President Trump's nominee to serve as a federal judge in Michigan. According to the Lansing State Journal, he argued in court, the message isn't Catholics need not apply, the message is discriminators need not apply. This is not about religion. Federal court nominees' home state senators have a say in their nominations. 2 Democrats represent Michigan. They both have supported moving Bogren's nomination forward.
The mission here at our family farm at the Country Mill is to glorify God.
As for Tennis, he's still fighting the city.
Never before would I ever have thought that the faith that we have here at our family, in our home, at our farm, would prohibit us from being allowed to participate in the community.
For now, the same court Bogren could serve is letting Tennis keep selling at the farmers market. The White House tells us they declined to comment on this nomination. Bogren himself did email back with me today. He said he was too busy to chat with me. He was in meetings all day. But one of the ideas in his defense is that lawyers represent all kinds of people, and they don't necessarily have to agree with their clients. Bogren himself was a member of the Republican National Lawyers Association. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Joining me now is Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief for The Hill. Bob, welcome back to the broadcast.
Hey, Lauren.
What do you think about that?
Fascinating. It's going to be an interesting hearing process. Now, remember, if Republicans band together, there's not going to be much of a controversy because the Democrats changed the rules and they just need a majority. But that is a fascinating case, and I'm not surprised that he's using that defense of, I don't have to agree with my client.
Or that he's in meetings?
Right,
oh, sorry.
that was a good one,
That was
too.
a good defense,
yes,
right?
Yes, but that's pretty normal to say, listen, I work for these people. That doesn't mean I believe everything. I was just representing them. So he's going to get some interesting questions, though.
I think so. Let's move on to abortion. In a series of tweets, as you saw earlier, President Trump appeared to distance himself from this Alabama law. Why make the distinction now? Why did he come out now? And is this going to hurt him with pro-life voters? You heard both pro-life groups aren't too happy about this.
No, they're not happy about it, but at the same time, I think the president was very careful there. And how often do we say that? A carefully worded tweet from the president. And it's in line with what Kevin McCarthy and Mitt Romney said, is that, listen, this was our policy before. It hasn't changed because of this court case. And remember, Republicans have largely been unified on this issue, and now they're a little bit fractured.
And I wonder if that's going to hurt in the future.
It could. But I do think that Trump's record as Supreme Court justices and judges, he can always go back to that.
Let's move on to Iran. Iran has quadrupled its production of low enrichment uranium. It's also fired a missile. And the USS Abraham Lincoln is conducting military exercises in the Arabian Sea. What's going on?
Well, we don't know the full story, and members are getting briefed this week on it, but Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, has pulled some people out of embassies in Iraq, so non-essential. So there's something going on here, and certainly we are boosting our presence in the Middle East, and of course some in Congress are saying, wait a minute, if there's going to be any type of conflict, Congress must vote. That's probably not going to happen, though.
Well, there's precedent for that, I do believe.
Yes. Well, the 9/11 authority is so broad, they can always just rely on that.
Yeah, I can't understand quite why this isn't getting more media attention. I haven't seen a lot of it today.
Yeah, no, it isn't. And a lot of it is because it's secret. They can't talk about the intelligence. But without a doubt, I mean, this is the closest that we have gone possibly to war with Iran in a long, long time. And all it takes is one misunderstanding. And certainly there are a lot of people around the globe who are very concerned about what happens next.
Thank you so much, Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief for The Hill.
Thanks.
Pope Francis and Donald Trump have one thing in common. They both want an end to fake news. Over the weekend, the Pope urged foreign correspondents to do a better job.
Il giornalista umile è un giornalista libero.
The Holy Father said journalism is an important tool to counter hatred, prejudice, and fake news. He said they should search for truth and give voice to the voiceless. The Pope expressed concern for attacks on journalists around the globe. Doctors in France have stopped feeding and hydrating a man who has been hospitalized in a vegetative state since 2014. His devout Catholic parents disagree with the court and want health care to continue. In a video released today, 42-year-old Vincent Lambert is seen lying in bed. He was critically injured in a 2008 car accident. He is a quadriplegic and is not in a coma. Pope Francis tweeted today saying, quote, "Let us always safeguard life, God's gift, from its beginning until its natural end." Professor Doyen Nguyen of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas joins us from Rome. She teaches moral theology and bioethics. You are one of the organizers for a conference happening right now in Rome on brain death, and it's held by the John Paul II Academy for Human Life and the Family, discussing the medical, legal, and moral aspects of brain death. What exactly is meant by brain death based on the neurological criteria?
Well, the concept was introduced in 1968, and it was published in what we call the Harvard Report in August 1968. And the opening paragraph of the Harvard Report say that they want to redefine irreversible coma as a new definition of death. And this new definition of death is labeled brain death. So brain death is actually properly called irreversible coma. In French, we call it le coma dépassé.
In the case of Vincent Lambert, the hospital has stopped his diet and hydration. From a Catholic perspective, is this committing murder?
Well, one would say, I would say this, as long as the person can absorb and can assimilate nutrients and excrete waste, the person is alive. And if you withhold nutrition and hydration in somebody who's capable of that, you basically kill them. All right? You kill them by dehydrating them. Now, then they may not move all the time. You may just have a little bit of the movement of the toe once 24 hours. But that still means that the soul is there.
This issue has caused a lot of controversy in France. We have had cases like this in the United States. Tell me your viewpoint. What should be done in cases of what was being called, in some cases, minimally conscious or brain dead?
All right. The fundamental criteria is that as long as life is present, and because man is not the author of his life, right, then you should not take life. That is the fundamental principle, all right? So, and then you go from there, all right? The minimally conscious person still have life in them. The persistent vegetative state person still have life in them, okay? The brain dead person also still have vegetative life in him or her. And they actually secrete. So you cannot take life from those who still have life present.
Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Doyen Nguyen of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas. This is such a timely topic, and we appreciate you joining us. Coming up, Bishop Robert Barron on the way forward from the Church's sex abuse crisis. Catholic dioceses all over the world continue to reel from sexual abuse allegations against priests and other clergy members. Now, a prominent U.S. bishop says the way forward is to bond together, not to pull apart. In February, Pope Francis held a global summit on preventing clergy misconduct. Earlier this month, he issued a groundbreaking new law requiring every priest and religious sister to report abuse or the cover-up of allegations. Advocates for survivors call it a step forward, even though the bill does not require clergy to file a report with police. Joining me now by Skype is Bishop Robert Barron, author of the new book, Letter to a Suffering Church. A bishop speaks on the sexual abuse crisis. Bishop Barron is founder of the Word on Fire Catholic Ministries and auxiliary bishop for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. He writes the book in his own name and not as an official response. Your Excellency, welcome back to the broadcast.
Good to be on as always. Thanks for having me.
Why did you title the first chapter of your book, The Devil's Masterpiece?
I think first to highlight the spiritual dimension of the issue, and not to gainsay for a second that human cooperation was very much involved. It's not an either or, but to signal the spiritual dimension of it. And, you know, from the beginning of this crisis, it's always struck me, it's just inadequate to explain this simply by appealing to, you know, human psychology, human machinations. There's something that's just so perfect about the way this crisis has undermined the church. It reaffirmed my belief in a supernatural intelligence that is the enemy of the church. And I just think I agree very much with Pope Francis that to ignore that spiritual dimension is to ignore the key element here.
You said that it is just too exquisitely designed, which I thought was perfect. Your book also highlights St. Peter Damian, an 11th century saint who focused on wiping out sins by clergy members. So tell us the historical connection to today.
I just think it's a distant mirror, to use Barbara Tuchman's famous phrase. We look back at the 11th century and we see in Peter Damian's, cri de coeur, his cry from the heart about the way especially high churchmen were abusing their own spiritual sons. That's what strikes me so much as redolent of the McCarrick situation. And he refers to it as spiritual incest, which I thought was really an apt way to put it.
When and that's Theodore McCarrick, who was here at the Archdiocese of Washington and then was later defrocked with allegations of sexual abuse.
Exactly. But when you have spiritual fathers preying on their own spiritual sons, there's something especially nefarious about that. And I think Peter Damian's powerful cry from the 11th century is echoed in the hearts of a lot of Catholics today.
You say that you understand in your book, and I've heard you say it before, the frustration and anger of abuse survivors. Mm-hmm. You also say there's never a good reason to leave the church. Can you understand their position?
Sure, and that's a big part of the book. I mean, in some ways the book is poised between these two poles. The one is understanding fully the anguish and the frustration, the anger of Catholics. Look, I'm a bishop of the church. I spend a lot of my time going out among the people of God. As I say in the book, you know, often clothed in the full liturgical regalia of a bishop. So there I am, beautifully symbolizing for people the church. I have heard this past, 9 months or so, the anguish and the anxiety and the anger of God's people. There's no question about it. And we can't deny it. We can't run from it. So all that's true. And I want to say it as powerfully as I can. At the same time, and to me, it's the most important line of the book, if you want. There's never a good reason to leave the church. Reason to be angry, reason to be frustrated, reason to call for change and reform, absolutely. But there's never a good reason to leave the source of salvation, to leave the mystical body of Christ. Instead, and this is my way of resolving that tension, it's the moment to stay and fight.
Oh, I was just going to say that. It is the time to stay and fight. I pulled it out too.
Very
We're going to
well
have to leave it there. Bishop Robert Barron, thank you so much. Founder of Word on Fire, Catholic Ministries, Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, and the author of Letter to a Suffering Church. Thank you, Bishop.
God bless you. Thanks.
The Catholic bishop in Dallas is challenging the accuracy of police allegations that the diocese thwarted an investigation into clergy abuse. In a statement, Bishop Edward Burns says the diocese turned over all of its files. Police last week raided church headquarters and a storage unit, saying church leaders were not forthcoming with requested information. Up next, praising the Lord. A Washington church is celebrating a new shepherd. And thousands march for life in Rome.
Gesù sempre apre orizzonti di speranza e l'amore di Gesù apre gli orizzonti di speranza.
Pope Francis says God's love opens horizons of hope. Speaking to the faithful in St. Peter's Square yesterday, the Holy Father said Jesus' love helps us to love those on the other side and forgive those who have offended us. Thousands packed the streets in Rome on Saturday for Italy's March for Life. Cardinal Raymond Burke led the pro-lifers. Marchers want the abolition of an Italian law permitting abortion within the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. One French protester said he hoped the wave of pro-life laws in the U.S. would soon reach Europe. Catholics in our nation's capital will soon have a new leader. Tomorrow, Wilton Gregory will be installed as the new Archbishop. He's the first African American to hold the position in Washington, and he's already made plans to celebrate Mass at one of the most prominent African American churches in the nation. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby joins us from St. Augustine's Catholic Church in Washington. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The community here at St. Augustine is excited about welcoming the new Archbishop to their church. They hope His Excellency Wilton Gregory will address their needs and the challenges in the Archdiocese. He'll get a warm welcome on June 2nd when he celebrates Mass here with the community's joyful gospel choir. For more than 3 decades, St. Augustine's, Washington's mother church of African American Catholics, has been filled with songs of praise. Here, in the heart of the nation's capital, the community's gospel choir aims to draw churchgoers closer to the Lord through hymns, psalms, and praise and worship music. The pastor, Father Patrick Smith, says the parish was founded over 100 years ago and welcomes people of all backgrounds.
Gospel transcends every culture. It doesn't all have to look like Europe because Christ, the gospel, is universal.
The Lord is risen.
Father Patrick says the Archbishop's visit is an important step for the community, as Black Catholics in the U.S. didn't always have the same opportunities.
You couldn't be a priest because of race. You couldn't go to Catholic school because of race. So it's really, it's an affirmation from the Pope that says that will not be a disqualifier for being a leading shepherd in the Archdiocese of Washington.
Archbishop Gregory will have a lot on his plate after he's formally installed tomorrow. Former D.C. Archbishop Theodore McCarrick was defrocked after it was revealed he sexually abused minors and adults. In light of the crisis, Pope Francis accepted the resignation of McCarrick's successor, Cardinal Donald Worrell, in October of 2018. Yvonne Hill, a longtime member of St. Augustine, hopes the Archbishop's installation will mark a new era for the Catholic Church.
I wouldn't say necessarily to right the wrongs of the past, but of course give some kind of comfort and maybe restitution, and I think that this Archbishop is going to do that.
Some members of this parish will be attending the Archbishop's installation tomorrow. For his part, Archbishop Gregory says he wants to get out and meet the people. He scheduled 6 listening sessions with clergy members in the Archdiocese to talk about the church's biggest challenges. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from St. Augustine Catholic Church in Washington. That looked like a lot of fun you had yesterday. Thank you, Wyatt. EWTN will air the installation Mass of Archbishop Wilton Gregory tomorrow, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern from the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. We'll have comprehensive coverage tomorrow evening on News Nightly. That does it for all of us here at News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.